Welcome to PPR Global. The recent remarkable military activity on Poland's border with Belarus points to developments that could change the balance of power in Eastern Europe. In particular, the U.S. military reinforcements to Poland and NATO's moves to reinforce its eastern border have raised tensions in the region. By sending powerful war machines and strategic equipment to Poland, the United States is further strengthening NATO's eastern flank. American war machines include Patriots and M1A Abrams tanks, very specialized equipment, which are being transferred to the most critical area between NATO and Russia. These moves are critical not only for Poland, but for the security of the whole of Europe. So what lies behind this military mobilization? What is behind Poland's ultimatum to Belarus and its border exercises? We will discover the details together. If you want to be informed about such critical developments, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Now let's analyze the strategic moves behind these important developments. In particular, the U.S. military upgrade to Poland and the most powerful U.S. war machines in the Polish army have made Poland the eastern stronghold of the alliance. Poland has started to take some measures to avoid being the next target and to challenge Vladimir Putin. The cooperation between the two countries has been increasing recently. The United States is strengthening its military presence near Russia's borders. The U.S. Army is carrying out an important logistical move as part of its efforts to increase its strategic presence in Europe in order to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. In this context, convoys carrying equipment belonging to the U.S. Army were filmed moving along the motorways of Poland. Residents in the Lubuski and Wielkopolska regions of Poland have witnessed a noticeable increase in the number of military vehicles traveling on the roads. Poland's Radio Z news agency, reporting on these developments, published photographs of military convoys, including tanks and other armored vehicles. According to the report, by the end of September, the U.S. military will transport a variety of military equipment from the military base in Mannheim, Germany, to warehouses in Powidz as part of the NATO-funded Army Prepositioned Stockpiles program. This equipment includes tanks, armored combat vehicles, and artillery systems. The APS program is critical to ensure that NATO member states are prepared for war and can respond quickly in the event of a crisis. This strategic move aims to increase deterrence on NATO's eastern borders, especially in the context of Russia's increased military activity in Ukraine and intensifying regional security concerns. The storage facilities at Powidz serve as a central point to support the operational capabilities of U.S. and NATO forces in Europe. At the same time, the strategic location of the warehouses in Powidz strengthens the U.S. Army's military presence in Europe. The facility is notable for being directly adjacent to an airfield. This facilitates the rapid air transport of ammunition and military equipment when necessary. This provides a great advantage in terms of military mobility and logistic capacity. In the future, the facility is planned to house 87 tanks, more than 150 infantry fighting vehicles, and 18 self-propelled howitzers. This shows that the facility will be capable of supporting large-scale military operations. In June, the U.S. Army announced the successful arrival of 14 M1 Abrams tanks and one M88 armored recovery vehicle at this strategic point, located about 250 miles west of Poland's border with Ukraine. This movement signals a strengthening of NATO forces in the region and an increase in their operational capacity. Retired U.S. Army Colonel Ray Wojcik said last month that the Powidz facility will eventually be capable of supporting an armored brigade. He emphasized that the U.S. and NATO military presence in the region could be considered as a clear message to Moscow. Wojcik also stated that thanks to this facility, the equipment will be able to be shipped to the front line in just a few days, instead of a month-long shipping time by ship. This rapid mobilization capability is critical to regional security dynamics and significantly increases NATO's ability to react quickly in the event of a crisis. Poland has also been among the countries most affected by the Russo-Ukrainian war, as it is neighboring Ukraine. This is why Warsaw is keen to protect its borders. Relations between Poland and Russia are characterized by a historical mistrust. The Ukraine war further reinforced this distrust. As a matter of fact, these developments could drag Poland into a wider conflict with devastating consequences. According to some experts, Poland may even be Russia's next target. Poland and the United States have had a volatile relationship over the years. However, the war in Ukraine has brought them closer and made Poland an indispensable ally. On the other hand, NATO's efforts to strengthen its eastern flank in Poland are taking place at a time of heightened regional tensions due to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian partisan group FIRE continues to provide remarkable information on military activity in Russia. This resistance group reported the presence of a convoy of advanced T-90M Prorv tanks seen near St. Petersburg after being transported from a military training ground in Sertolovo, in the Leningrad region of Russia. This is considered an unusual observation in the region. St. Petersburg is closer to NATO's Estonian borders than to the Ukrainian front. The information provided by the Atesh partisan group also reveals the pressure on Russia's defense industry caused by the heavy sanctions imposed by the West. The group points to increasing difficulties and systematic problems in the Russian defense industry. The partisans also report that a convoy of valuable T-90M Prorv tanks was spotted in an area close to Estonia and Finland, about 150 kilometers from St. Petersburg. The images show a Russian armored convoy of at least 10 vehicles. But the location of the sighting of these modern machines is of great importance. St. Petersburg is not a region directly involved in the war in Ukraine, but it is located quite far from the border with the defended country. Another batch of Russian armored vehicles will soon turn into a pile of rusty scrap, just like before, a representative of the Atesh group commented, pointing out the irony of the situation. These tanks are reportedly being used for training purposes near St. Petersburg and are expected to be sent to the active front with new crews soon. This mobility further complicates the dynamics of Russia's military strategy and its implications for regional security. As the situation in Eastern Europe escalates, Putin remains confident that he can outflank the West and win in Ukraine. The annual NATO summit in early July resulted in a series of encouraging statements and practical measures in support of Ukraine. However, this widely anticipated meeting in Washington, D.C. failed to produce the kind of decisive action that could convince Vladimir Putin to end his occupation. Sometime before the NATO summit, it was already clear that there would be no serious discussion about a membership invitation for Ukraine. Instead, the emphasis was to be on improving the existing partnership, and the alliance leaders were to retain as much room for maneuver as possible in dealing with the Russian-Ukrainian war. Post-summit coverage centered on the official communiqué declaring Ukraine's irreversible path to future NATO membership, but not everyone saw the wording of the joint statement as a turning point. Indeed, some skeptics interpreted this latest restatement of NATO's open door to Ukraine as an indication that the alliance was still no closer to agreeing on a specific time frame for Ukrainian membership. The summit was, of course, not a complete disappointment. Many countries promised Ukraine additional air defense systems, meeting one of Kiev's most urgent demands to protect the country from Russian bombing. There were announcements of the imminent arrival of the first F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, and additional mechanisms were announced to coordinate arms deliveries and improve cooperation. NATO members also agreed in Washington to allocate 40 billion euros for military aid to Ukraine next year. While this figure is certainly significant, it falls far short of the level of funding needed to ensure Ukraine's victory. This is not a new issue. Although the total GDP of the West dwarfs that of Russia, Western leaders have yet to mobilize their financial resources to give Ukraine an overwhelming military advantage. As a result, it is the much smaller Russian economy that currently produces more artillery shells than the entire Western world. The modest progress made at the NATO summit reflects the lack of urgency that has hampered the Western response since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion. This hesitation is unlikely to lead to a change of heart in Moscow. On the contrary, Russian politicians are much more likely to see the West's current stance as evidence that the war is going according to plan. Unlike the West, the Kremlin has a clear and coherent vision of a future Russian victory in Ukraine. This includes the gradual erosion of Ukrainian battlefield resilience through relentless high-intensity fighting on the front lines of the war and the extensive bombing of civilian infrastructure and population centers throughout the country. In parallel with these military measures, Russia will continue to conduct a variety of influence operations targeting Ukrainian and Western audiences in order to demoralize and create division. This will leave Ukraine increasingly isolated and exhausted, eventually leading to collapse and capitulation. Russian officials believe that Ukraine will find it difficult to attract the attention of its Western allies and are encouraged by growing signs that many in the West now see the occupation as a dead end. Putin himself seems more confident than ever that the West will lose interest in the war and expects Western leaders to force Kiev into a negotiated settlement on Russian terms. Since the occupation began nearly 2.5 years ago, Western leaders have failed to show the kind of resolve that would force Putin to reconsider his expectations. Instead of flooding Kiev with the latest tanks, jets, drones, and missiles, Ukraine's partners have steadily slowed down military aid while imposing absurd restrictions on the use of Western weapons. The West's messages were equally inadequate. Instead of publicly committing to Ukraine's victory, Western leaders talked about preventing Ukraine's defeat and standing by Ukraine for as long as necessary. This is not the language of power that Putin understands. Faced with continuing signs of Western indecision, the Russian dictator is now escalating his demands. The latest peace proposal envisaged Ukraine handing over all the territory occupied by Russia and a significant amount of additional territory not currently under Kremlin control. There can be little doubt that he is as determined as ever for Ukraine's complete surrender and subjugation. Putin knows that he cannot hope to match the collective strength of the democratic world, but this does not encourage him. Instead, he expects the continued weakness of the West to give Russia a historic victory in Ukraine. As long as the West is not finally ready to convert its vast financial, military, and technical potential into war-winning support for Ukraine, he may be proved right. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine is reshaping European defense. The recent re-election of Ursula von der Leyen as President of the European Commission marks another chapter in European politics, especially in light of the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict. Von der Leyen, who previously served as Germany's defense minister, won a strong majority, signaling continuity in the EU's current policy direction. Her tenure was characterized by her hawkish stance on most policies, especially regarding the war in Ukraine. The role of the President of the European Commission is varied and critical. Firstly, the position involves managing the EU bureaucracy which, despite its relatively small size by European standards, has significant legal authority over a wide range of European affairs. Perhaps even more critical is that the President serves as a crisis mediator between various European countries. This aspect of the role is particularly vital given the EU's complex decision-making processes, which often require unanimity or qualified majority voting. The EU's voting system is a nuanced and complex affair, reflecting the diverse needs and influences of its member states. On matters requiring unanimity, each country, regardless of its size, effectively has veto power. This can lead to protracted negotiations and search for compromises, as Malta's interests have to be balanced with those of Germany. On the other hand, the qualified majority voting system is a hybrid structure that takes into account both population size and economic power. Similar to the U.S. Electoral College, it provides a more balanced approach to decision-making, although it still favors smaller states to some extent. But its complexity requires skillful management and mediation, a task that falls on the shoulders of the Commission President. In her pre-election speech, von der Leyen outlined her priorities for the upcoming term. While many of these were expected, such as advancing the Green New Deal and strengthening cyber defense capabilities, one proposal stood out: the creation of a common European air defense area. This initiative marks a significant shift in EU policy and could potentially change the balance of power between the EU and NATO, the two institutions that have dominated European affairs for the last 75 years. The evolution of the European Union from the coal and steel community to the European community and finally to its current form has focused primarily on economic integration. Despite facing numerous challenges and ongoing debates, the EU has made significant progress in creating a common trading bloc, a unified market, and harmonizing banking and financial regulation. In fact, the EU's achievements in these areas have exceeded the expectations of many observers a quarter of a century ago, especially in the wake of the financial crisis of the mid-2000s. NATO has been the primary institution responsible for European defense, initially against the Soviet Union and now against Russia. NATO, dominated by the United States, or more generously by the United States and the United Kingdom, faced significant challenges in the 2000s and 2010s. During this period, many European countries, notably Germany, downplayed their security concerns. This complacent attitude persisted even after Russia's first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, with some European countries, including Germany, considering significant cuts in military spending or even disbanding their armed forces altogether. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 significantly changed this landscape. The ferocity and scale of the war forced European countries to reassess their security priorities, leading to a renewed focus on defense capabilities and spending. This is the context in which von der Leyen's proposal for a common European air defense domain gains relevance. The need for such a system is clear. The Ukraine war has clearly shown how vulnerable critical infrastructure is to missile and drone attacks. European leaders are acutely aware that their countries, which are more technologically advanced and infrastructure dependent than Ukraine, would face even more disastrous consequences from similar attacks. An integrated air and missile defense system is seen as an essential component in mitigating this threat. The proposed European air defense area would probably include a network of radar systems, surface-to-air missile batteries, and interceptor aircraft integrated through an advanced command and control system. Such a system would need to be able to detect, track, and intercept a wide range of airborne threats, from ballistic missiles to low-flying unmanned aerial vehicles. The technical challenges involved in creating such a system are significant and require not only significant financial investment, but also an unprecedented level of coordination and integration between European militaries. One of the main technical obstacles will be to achieve interoperability between different national systems. European countries currently operate a wide range of air defense systems, from the American Patriot missiles to the Franco-Italian SAMP-T system. Integrating these various systems into a coherent whole will require significant technical expertise and the development of potentially new interface technologies. Another critical aspect of the proposed air defense domain is the need for real-time data sharing and decision-making capabilities. Given the short flight times of modern missiles, especially in the European theater, reaction times must be measured in minutes or even seconds. This requires the development of advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning systems to help human operators make decisions in a fraction of a second. The creation of this air defense area can also stimulate innovation in other areas of military technology. For example, it could stimulate the development of new types of missile interceptors, more advanced radar systems, or new electronic warfare capabilities. This could revive the European defense industry and reduce the continent's dependence on American military technology. What makes von der Leyen's proposal particularly striking, however, is her suggestion that this should be an EU initiative rather than a NATO initiative. This represents a potential shift in the traditional division of responsibilities between the two organizations and could signal a more assertive EU role in defense matters. The proposal faces several challenges, both technical and political. First and foremost is the question of resources. Previous attempts to create European defense initiatives independent of NATO have failed due to lack of funding and political will. However, the war in Ukraine has prompted many European countries to significantly increase their defense budgets. This influx of resources could potentially support both NATO commitments and new EU defense initiatives. Another challenge lies in the relationship between the EU and NATO. Most EU members are also NATO members, but there are exceptions. 4 EU countries, Malta, Ireland, Austria, and Cyprus, are not part of NATO. While Malta's security concerns are primarily focused on illegal immigration from Africa and Ireland has historically adopted a somewhat passive approach to continental defense issues, Austria and Cyprus present more complex situations. Austria can navigate this new defense landscape by remaining neutral and avoiding certain decisions due to electoral and historical circumstances. Cyprus, however, poses a more significant challenge. As an EU member state with less than 1 million inhabitants, Cyprus has deep-rooted cultural and military conflicts with Turkey, an important trading partner of the EU but not an EU member state. Cyprus's veto power over EU decisions could potentially complicate the implementation of a common air defense area, especially if it perceives that the system could benefit Turkey. The situation is further complicated by Cyprus's unique position in European affairs. The last time Cyprus was the subject of significant international news coverage was during the financial crisis of the late 2000s. Despite being the recipient of the smallest bailout among the affected European countries, Cyprus's status as a money laundering center made the bailout disproportionately controversial and complex. This history suggests that Cyprus's role in any new European defense initiative could be equally complex and contentious. The proposed European air defense area also raises questions about the future relationship between the EU and NATO. One possibility is for European countries to greatly increase their defense spending, potentially creating a parallel capacity to NATO. This scenario becomes more likely with Ukraine performing worse in the war, as European countries may feel compelled to strengthen their own defenses independently. Alternatively, the EU and NATO could move towards closer integration, potentially merging certain aspects of their operations. This would require careful negotiation, particularly with regard to the participation of non-NATO EU members and non-EU NATO members such as the UK. The UK's position in this new security landscape is particularly interesting. Having left the EU but remaining a key member of NATO, the UK may find itself in a unique position to influence the development of European defense policy from the outside. How the UK chooses to interact with these new initiatives could have important implications for both European security and Britain's post-Brexit relationship with the continent. The proposed air defense area also reflects a growing recognition of the changing nature of warfare. The Ukraine war has demonstrated the critical importance of air and missile defense systems in modern warfare. The development of this air defense area could also have important implications for the European defense industry. Major defense contractors in countries such as France, Germany, and Italy could see significant benefits from such a large-scale project. This could increase Europe's technological capabilities and reduce dependence on American defense technology. However, it also raises questions about fair competition and the distribution of contracts among EU member states. Smaller countries with less developed defense industries may be concerned about missing out on the economic benefits of such a large project. Balancing these conflicting interests will be a critical challenge for the EU leadership. Russia will undoubtedly be skeptical of such a development and may see it as a provocative move. China will also be watching these developments closely. As Beijing seeks to expand its global influence, including in Europe, the creation of a more militarily capable and assertive EU could complicate its strategic calculations. For the United States, the development of an EU air defense domain presents both opportunities and challenges. On the one hand, a more capable European defense could allow the United States to reduce its military commitments in Europe and free up resources for other global priorities. On the other hand, Washington may be concerned about the potential reduction of its influence in European security affairs if the EU assumes a more prominent defense role. The success or failure of this initiative could also have wider implications for European integration. The successful implementation of a common air defense area could pave the way for deeper cooperation in other areas of defense and security. It could potentially serve as a model for how the EU could develop shared capabilities in other critical areas, such as cyber defense or space-based assets. If the project is hampered by internal disputes or technical difficulties, it could reinforce skepticism about the EU's ability to act coherently on major security issues. This in turn could strengthen the position of those who argue that NATO should remain the primary instrument for European defense. As the project progresses, several key questions will need to be addressed. How will the system be financed, And how will the costs be distributed among EU members? Will European countries outside the EU be invited to participate, and if so, on what terms? How will the system interface with existing national air defense capabilities and NATO systems? The answers to these questions will shape not only the effectiveness of the proposed air defense area, but also the future of European security cooperation more generally. They will require careful deliberation and may lead to heated debates both within and between European countries. In conclusion, the re-election of Ursula von der Leyen as President of the European Commission and the proposal for a common European air defense area represent a potential turning point in European security policy. Born out of the urgent lessons of the Ukraine conflict, this initiative could reshape the continent's security landscape and redefine relations between the EU, NATO, and its member states. Thank you for watching us.